Well, welcome back to the Choosing Known podcast. I'm Laura Catherine Etheridge.
I'm Camille Bishop.
And we are very glad to be back with you this week. So I know we've been going through this journey, continuing the journey of the attributes of God, and we continue with the way he described himself in Exodus 34.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the attribute that I know we'd said, let's talk about today in Exodus 34, he describes himself as being the God that is abounding in steadfast love.
Yes.
And we thought we'd unpack that today. And maybe we start with, what does that mean, abounding in steadfast love?
I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite descriptions of the Lord, especially in the Old Testament, because the word, the Hebrew word that captures the concept of steadfast love is hesed, which is a much broader concept than we often think. It is a love that is covenantal. So when God makes a covenant with his people and he said, I will abound in steadfast love, I am committed to you. It is, it's not a transactional. It's not based on, what we do, but it's based on his nature and character. I am abounding in hesed, and I will stay faithful to you. I will continue to love you, even if you don't love me, even if you're not acting appropriately. My love is steadfast. It's similar to, of course, the concept of marriage. When people make a covenant of marriage, they covenant to love one another till death do you part, regardless of what happens. So it's based on a covenant. It's not based on just a transaction or a feeling. So it is a very deep and abiding love that is captured in the Old Testament, and you see this word used over and over in the Old Testament. My steadfast love. You're my rock. You're my fortress. And God includes that in his description of himself to Moses. I'm merciful. I'm compassionate. I'm slow to anger, and I'm abounding in steadfast love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you're talking about it, the covenant piece. The closest picture we would have these days is marriage, and yet, unlike what we see in 50% of marriages that end in divorce, God is actually a God of steadfast love. He does not ever do that, ever, ever, ever. And it's almost hard for us to imagine receiving that kind of love, because it's like we think, well, there's a point when
I don't deserve it.
Yeah, I don't deserve it, and you're going to get mad at me. And we're so used to living in this world where someone getting really mad at me means they totally just get rid of me in their life.
Exactly right.
Whether that's divorce in the picture of marriage, or they just block me and they never speak to me again. They never engage with me again. Yep. They act like I don't exist. It's like we're so used to that.
It's so true.
It's so hard to fathom a being, the God of the universe, that says, I am, and I love how he describes it, I am abounding in.
Yes.
So there's this unending supply of steadfast love. It's just like you have to stop and think about, what in the world, like how can this be? And yet this is who he is.
This is who he is. And that's who he is through the entire biblical story.
Yes.
Even at the beginning of the story, when, we begin to see, Adam and Eve decide, what, I don't want to do things God's way.
Yes.
I'm going to break off. I'm going to do things my own way. I'm going to exercise my own willfulness. And of course, it grieved the heart of God, but he did not cut them off.
No.
He clothed them. He did make them leave the garden for their own protection.
Yes.
But he was still, wanting to, show his love to them and his compassion to them. And you see this throughout the biblical story, the God who is patient, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, gracious, merciful, over and over again, regardless of how people, act. And many times, God's people, did not act very nicely, and God continued to show his love to them, even when he had to allow them to suffer the consequences of their behavior. Still, he didn't remove his love from them. So it is, and like you said, it's hard to imagine today, because even today, especially in the technological world that we live in, it's so easy to just block a contact, ghost somebody, never respond to them again, cut them off, and you never have to look them in the eye.
Cancel them.
You just cancel them, and that's the way it is.
Yes.
And that is so the antithesis of what God wants for us. He wants us to live in a connected world. He created us for relationship. He created us for himself, for each other. He has always invited us to an integrated world that is very relational, because he's relational. And so it's almost inconceivable, to think of a love like that in today's context, where it's so normal, where people are just getting rid of each other, canceling relationships. But God's not like that.
No, he's not. He's not like that. And I know we had talked about beforehand, what story do you pick? Because there's so many stories of this in the Old Testament and the New Testament, examples. And we settled on one we both really enjoy, that would be a good one to see this attribute in motion. In who God is.
Yes, and we like you said, there are so many examples we could choose throughout the entire biblical story of God's steadfast love. But we've been focusing on the life of Jesus, and how Jesus, fully God, fully human, illustrated God's steadfast love, in the Gospels. And so we've decided to talk about the life of Peter today, and how Jesus really showed his steadfast love to Peter.
So what's the context? Because we want to read a few verses, but there's a lot. It would be a lot to read.
Yes.
To really make sense of like how incredibly loving and sweet and tender this moment is for Peter. Well, what's the context of what we're going to read?
This is one of my absolute favorite stories out of the Gospels, especially when it comes to God's steadfast love, because when you look through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you see the beginning of Jesus's ministry, and he begins to call certain people to follow him. And so early on, Jesus met a couple of guys that were fishing, and one of them was Peter, Simon Peter. And Jesus just simply says to him, follow me. And Peter left his fishing vocation and began to follow Jesus, as did, 11 other guys. And Jesus begins to invest in Peter. He begins to teach him, to disciple him. Peter's one of the 12, and there he's following Jesus, living with Jesus, co-ministering with Jesus. And Jesus you start to see how Jesus is showing Peter, who he really is, and what he can become, And even early on, Jesus said, I'm going to start calling you, Peter, the rock, and upon this rock, the gates of hell shall not prevail. And then Jesus says, but, I am going to have to suffer and die. And Peter goes, no, that will never happen to you, Lord. And he says, hey, get behind me, Satan. So, he had these many dialogues with Peter where he saw the capacity that Peter had to love God, and who Jesus wanted him to become. Bold, courageous, strong man of God, but then also recognizing the insecurities and the fears in Peter's life. So Jesus was seeing all of Peter, the complete package, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he was investing in him, loving him deeply.
Yes. Yeah, and Peter's the one that, like you said, so many stories in the gospel. when there's a moment for Jesus asking the disciples to do something, he's always that one that's like, I'll try it, I'll do it, I'll
Yep.
jump in. And he gets kind of, if we know the Bible, people pick on Peter a lot. He's an easy one to pick on.
He is.
He's the one that actually does something.
Exactly
the rest of them sit in the
right.
boats. You don't pick on them, but they kind of hold back a lot of times. And Peter's this one that jumps out, and he puts himself out there, and he's always the go-getter, and you can just feel the energy and the confidence and his like, yeah, guys. And you feel that when you read these stories. And so it's not terribly surprising. He ends up having this time where Jesus begins to talk about his death, and he says, I'm going to be killed. And Peter reacts to that. No, no, you're not. And Jesus tells him, Peter, you're the voice of the evil one. You are to get behind me. This is not the will of is not the will of God. God's will is for me to die. And that's a hard thing for a Peter to grapple with, of course.
Yes.
It'd be hard for us to grapple with. And so then he comes into the part of the story we want to read today.
Sure. I just want to mention one other thing to pick up on this, because Peter was this impetuous kind of guy, willing to take a risk.
He was.
Willing to take a risk. When we read about the story, because there are many stories in the Gospels about Peter, and when one time when the guys were in a boat, and a big storm came up and they were scared to death and they thought they were going to die. And all of a sudden here comes Jesus walking on the water and they think he's a ghost. And Peter said, well, if it's you, Lord, let me walk on the water. And
what a litmus test.
And Jesus says, well, come on.
Yeah.
And Peter literally steps out of the boat into these, raging, ocean waves and doesn't sink.
Yep.
He's walking on the water. He took a risk. And then, of course, he starts looking at the situation and the circumstances, and he starts to sink. And he's got, Jesus, help me. And Jesus reaches out his hand and helps Peter. But like you said, Peter at least got out of the boat. He was the only one, and so here is this man. He's a complex person, as we all are.
Yep.
We are all very complicated.
Yes.
And we have our outward appearance, and we have the under the surface parts of us that no one else sees, but the Lord sees. And so Peter was like that too. And, as Peter has been walking with Jesus for 3 years, 3 years is a long time to follow Jesus, to watch him, to engage life with him. 3 long years. And of course, all of the disciples, they are growing in their love for this Jesus, growing in their trust of Jesus, becoming believers, really believers in Jesus. And yet not fully grasping what this was how it was all going to turn out, because underneath the surface, they all wanted Jesus to be the Messiah who would overthrow the Roman Empire, overthrow the Roman oppression, and take the leadership of the Jewish people. Yeah. And that wasn't the plan. And so, so here we come, to the end of Jesus's life, and Jesus has told them again, I am going to suffer. I'm going to be crucified, which was horrific in their minds because they had seen many crucifixions. Yeah. I'm going to die, but I'm going to be resurrected. They didn't get it. But towards the end, Jesus is repeating this to them again. They're actually at the Passover, the Last Supper. And Jesus looks at Peter and says, I've been praying for you because Satan wants to sift you like wheat. Yeah. Sift you like wheat. In other words, you're going to go through a very significant test. Yeah. And he said, I've been praying for you, Peter, but you're going to deny me. And Peter said, Lord, that is never going to happen. I will never deny you. If everyone else here denies you, it will never be me. And Jesus said, before the rooster crows 3 times, you will deny me 3 times. Peter couldn't grasp it. He couldn't imagine that he was capable of such a thing. And that's just similar to us.
Oh, yeah.
Many times in our lives, we are shocked at some of the things that we're capable of. The deep anger, the fears, the reactions, some of the things that, that we just have thought, that will never be me, Lord. I will never do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you fast forward and, Jesus has been arrested and he is there. The people are milling around like a fire, out in this courtyard where they're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. And people start making comments like, I've seen you before. You know Jesus. And Peter goes, no, I don't. And then somebody else says, hey, I know you. You're a Galilean. You have been with Jesus. He goes, I know. I don't know him. And then finally somebody else, and Peter just says emphatically, I don't know the man.
Yeah. And it says in the Gospels, he curses. He starts cursing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And at that moment, a rooster crows. And we see this in John chapter 21. Mm. John 21 is when we're going to get there. But we see this account in the Gospels, and it says that Jesus turned and looked at him. Yeah. He just looked at him. Yeah. And you often wonder, and I know you've said it the same thing, what kind of look was that? Was it a look of condemnation? Was it a look of disappointment? Was it a look of just, I know? Yeah. I know it personally. I don't think it was a look of condemnation or disappointment. I think it was one of those looks of, I know you, Peter, and what you've just done, you will suffer more from what you have just done because of your own shame and your own great disappointment in yourself. Mm-hmm. But Jesus' steadfast love has not left.
Mm-mm. No, and I think inside that look, it's like comes this understanding that they held that when he looked at Peter with the timing, mm-hmm. for Peter, it would prompt him to reckon back to the conversation mm-hmm. and how Jesus was speaking to him, not just what he said, but how he was speaking with mm-hmm. him, what he was talking about. He said, I'm going to be praying for you, Peter. Yes. And it's like, and here's Peter finding out mm-hmm. for the first time in his life, this is inside of me. Yes. This thing that I hate this. I don't mm-hmm. want to be this person. Right. And we're so shocked, mm-hmm. Whenever any of us, we fail, like one of the most painful parts is we're so incredibly disappointed in ourselves. Mm-hmm. How could I do that? Right. And it's like, but inside of that, sometimes I realize, Catherine, do you realize what that means? You think that you couldn't. Right. You think somehow you're so okay and so put together and mm-hmm. so that you couldn't. You couldn't. Yes, you could. Yes. Yes, you could. And that's what I think too, we'll see it in the story, but the Lord so wants us to eventually see those layers. Mm-hmm. Because if that's left out and we disown it, it never gets redeemed. Mm-hmm. It can't be touched by the love of the Lord. It has to come under someone's will. Yes. And come into the presence of Jesus to be touched by his love, mm-hmm. which is where we're going, this whole steadfast love. But Peter is just like ripping apart that mm-hmm. sifting of wheat. I mean, it's like, to me, I just think about his insides just shredding inside mm-hmm. at this very deep level, realizing me? Yeah, I know. I'm capable of that. And I just did this to Jesus. Yep. Who has invested in me for 3 years and believed in me. It must be all over now. He'll never have me back. And I just said I would go with him to death. I just said mm-hmm. I would die with you. Right. And it's like, how can I be these two people? Exactly right. Yeah. And that is a common human experience. For everybody. And then, like you said, there are layers underneath the surface, and a lot of it is fear. Yes. Imagine that Peter was dealing with a lot of fears. And then it says he went away and he wept bitterly. Yeah. And you can only imagine, because I know that times in my life where I have deeply failed, how I wept. Yes. And how disappointed I felt in myself, and how I wondered, would God still love me? Yeah.
And then we get to, John 21, where,
Well, and he real quick too. So Jesus does die.
yes,
3 days he's in the grave.
Yep.
Jesus had told them he's going to raise from the dead, but I mean, how do you understand that? How do you ever come to understand what he's saying? Like, he's literally going to be dead for 3 days and then come to life again.
right.
So poor Peter,
Yep.
he's processing this
For 3 days.
For 3 days, not knowing that it's only 3 days.
Right.
And then we come to this story.
Exactly right. And you see this steadfast love, of Jesus. And what's so beautiful is that in John chapter 21, Jesus shows up and he reveals himself to some of his disciples while they're fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love this because Jesus is going to restore Peter back in his vocational trade of fishing, is where Jesus first called him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's not going to the synagogue. It's not done in some religious service. It's out next to the lake where they're fishing, and they haven't caught anything. They fished all night. And Jesus said, if you just put the net over here on the right side, you'll find some fish. And all of a sudden, they had so many fish they couldn't even bring them all in. And then it says in verse 7, the disciple whom Jesus loved, which is John, says to Peter, "It's the Lord."
Mm-hmm.
It's Jesus. And Peter, typical Peter, he takes off, he puts on this outer garment that he had already taken off, and he throws himself into the water, right? He throws himself, and the other disciples are dragging the fish in. And listen to this is so precious. Verse 9, and when they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with the fish laid out on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And Jesus said, "Come and have breakfast." Come and have breakfast. And nobody said, "Who are you?" because they knew it was Jesus. And then in verse 15, Jesus shows his steadfast love to Peter. And he says to Peter, when they finished eating, he says, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And Peter says, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." He asked him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know I love you." And Jesus said, "Tend my sheep." And then he said to the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter was grieved because he asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he says, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." So 3 times Peter had denied Jesus. 3 times Jesus allows Peter to say, "Lord, you know I love you." 3 times. And it was around a fire that Peter denied Jesus. It's around a fire where Peter's being restored.
Yeah.
And then not only is Jesus restoring him, but Jesus is saying, "Now continue in the ministry I've called you to. Feed my sheep. You're going to go on to continue to be a teacher and a leader in the church. Tend my lambs, feed my sheep." So Jesus has completely restored Peter. He has forgiven him. He has reaffirmed his love for him, and his mission, his calling has not been lost. It's just a beautiful story.
It's such a beautiful story. And, with this idea of the abounding steadfast love, it's like Jesus has only abounding steadfast love.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he could be angry with Peter. He could ridicule Peter. He could call Peter out.
Yep.
He could embarrass Peter.
Mm-hmm.
He could point out all of his wrongs. But Jesus comes and he finds him.
Mm-hmm.
And he brings the steadfast love, and his desire,
Yes.
because he says in Exodus, God says in Exodus,
Mm-hmm.
I am the God abounding in steadfast
Steadfast
love.
love.
It's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And here he comes and he does this to Peter.
Yep.
I am abounding in steadfast love for you, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And he restores over and over
Yep.
these places in Peter where Peter has found out now, I'm
Yep.
not only that bold guy,
Mm-hmm.
I'm also this guy that can make some massive mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus loves me.
Exactly right.
He
And
loves
he
me.
loves me. And then but then what's so funny is, he's restored, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the very next sentence, Jesus said, he tells him a little example and said, this is a picture of how you will die.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter says, but Lord, what about John? And Jesus said, don't worry about him.
Yeah.
You follow me. The very two words that Jesus started his relationship with Peter, follow me, 3 years before.
Continue.
Follow me.
Yeah.
So, he's restored, and then and then Peter has just revealed another insecurity that's under the surface. And Jesus is like, well, don't worry about that. Don't compare yourself to someone else. You follow me. And then we start to see, as soon as Jesus goes back to be with the Father and he ascends back into heaven, and these disciples are released to begin taking leadership of the church, Peter is a transformed person.
Yes.
Not perfect. Still, he's still, a broken human being living in this fallen world, but he is a transformed person because of God's steadfast love. And he starts to become bold, courageous, a major leader in the church, discipling others. He wrote 2 letters in the New Testament, 1st and 2nd Peter. You see, he's a transformed man because of what? Love.
Yes.
Love.
Yes.
Now that's powerful.
It's so powerful. It's like, and that's where we're like, you and I talk about the transformation is I'm really different.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's still the layers.
Yes.
Because I'm really different in that layer. And then like you're bringing up, and then Peter immediately something else emerges and Jesus says, hey, Peter, follow me. Because it's like there's all these layers inside of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the Lord just, he wants us to know him in this way.
Yes.
Because we bring to him, where we are. And I think about, people that I've talked to in the world, a lot of coaching, and a lot of times people are going through something hard, something really hard, something they're disappointed with themselves about, a broken thing in their life, their marriage, their family, something they're really hurting. And what do? We so often do what Peter did. We go back and we just get busy doing something we know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus comes and finds him there.
Yes.
And so whether I've gone back to my job to just busy myself, or I've run off over here and I like to watch a lot of TV to busy myself, or I just spend a lot of time with people to busy myself. We all have those things where we're so disappointed in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We've messed up, we've blown it. And I think we can feel like, I can't go to God. And so like we keep beating ourselves up, and we keep ripping ourselves apart, and we cry, and we're angry at ourselves, and I'll try harder, and we keep doing it, but it doesn't change us. It doesn't transform us.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Only being in the presence of Jesus.
Yes.
And steadfast love. Just, it's like it's the most painful healing thing that you can ever experience.
Yes.
Because it's like, it's so, you have to come to it with all the raw nakedness of what you've done. And yet then he brings this healing and transformation.
Yes.
And that's just a
it's
piece
beautiful.
that it is. It's just a piece that I think for each of us, and as you're maybe listening to this podcast, it's like, we want to remember that, because whatever that may be in our current life circumstance, whatever that's maybe been in a past life circumstance that we've tried to bury over with a lot of busyness of some sort, God is a God of steadfast love.
Yes. Yeah, and I just totally agree with you, Laura Catherine, and with all of your coaching experience, and you're encountering this over and over again. What really transforms people is not condemnation.
No, it's not.
It's not, belittling. It's not beating yourself up. It is love. God's love can change us, and it helps us also to reach out to others with love. Mm-hmm. So, if you're listening to this, podcast today, and you may be disappointed in yourself, you may be thinking, wow, I didn't know I was capable of that. I didn't even know that thing was under the surface, but now it's popped up. Take it to Jesus and bring it to his abounding, steadfast love, and just say, wow, Lord, I blew it. I'm really disappointed, but Lord, I know you love me. I know you will forgive me, and you will help me to change, and you can transform me to be more and more into the person that you've always created me to be. And so, Lord, I'm thankful. I'm just thankful for your steadfast love.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a beautiful place to end. And I also think about, in this story, we see that, Peter, the moment that he hears his fellow disciple, John, who wrote this account that we read today, the moment he hears him say, "It's the Lord."
Yes.
His first response is to jump into that water and go towards Jesus as fast as he can. And that just is something sometimes we need to stop and think about, because he knew he had blown it big time, and he was dealing with the anguish of that and had been, and yet the place he wanted to go as fast as he could was back into the presence of Jesus. That is the kind of Jesus that loves you.
Yes.
And he loves each of us. And so whatever you've done, whatever you have done, this is where you go. If you want to receive love and you want to receive healing, the Lord knows there's consequences that we're going to have to work through because of what we've done. That doesn't disappear instantly because of the love of God. But he wants to be with you and heal you and restore you in it as you walk through whatever may be. But he loves you. He loves you. And so we pray that you will turn to him and spend time with him, and hope you have a very blessed next few weeks.
Thank you for watching. God bless you.